Before we dive into any technical content, we are going to discuss some important items regarding interviews and whiteboard questions. I want to put you in a certain frame of mind of how you should approach interviews and interview questions. So let's get to it. We'll start off by looking at a couple of different diagrams. First, I want to show you a quick timeline of the general job seeking process at any given company. Getting an offer from a company is really split into two different phases: the contact phase and the interview phase. The contact phase is when you try to get in contact with a living, breathing human at a company. And this might take the form of talking to a recruiter, getting a referral from a friend, or submitting your resume through some online form. Now this part at the top isn't too bad. Right now there's a pretty good amount of demand for software engineers, and so after some amount of time of sending out your resume, talking to recruiters, eventually you will get through this phase. What comes after the contact phase is much more interesting. So after you make this initial contact, you move on to the interview phase. The interview phase consists of phone screens, take-home coding assignments, and on-site interviews. This is the real make or break part, the part that decides whether or not you're going to get an offer. With these two phases in mind, I want to now ask you a question. So during each of these two phases, what is the average company looking to evaluate in you? Well, I've got a couple thoughts about that. I think that the average company is evaluating a couple different qualities in you during each of these two phases. So during the initial contact phase, the company kind of wants to get a general idea of who you are. So what work experience do you have? Do you have any interesting side projects? Are you friends with many people at the company? During the second phase, however, during the interview phase, there are some distinctly different qualities that a company really wants to evaluate. Once you meet and interview in person, they're going to try to decide whether or not you're a good culture fit, like whether your personality is going to mesh well with other people at that company. But much, much more importantly than that, it's during this interview phase that a company is going to attempt to evaluate whether or not you are an effective coder or a good engineer. So what's the point of this? I'm sure you've already gotten a good idea of how companies hire people, but the point here is that I want to really make sure that it's clear that out of all these different qualities, out of everything that a company is doing to evaluate you, there is exactly one make or break quality that you can improve right now, today, and that is your ability to code. Your ability to answer coding interview questions is the single most important quality that you are going to be judged on during the interview process. I personally have seen many people apply and get accepted to companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and many of them had little work experience, no side projects, no social contacts. They might not be the nicest person in the world, maybe they didn't have the best culture fit, but they could code and they could answer whiteboard questions effectively. And that is going to override every other quality during the interview process. So the big takeaway here is that just by being here in this course, watching this video right now, you're making a great move because you are on the path to improving one of the most critical and easily improvable areas for getting a great job. Now, I hope that doesn't sound like too much of a marketing statement on my part, but really, I want you to understand that there's nothing that gives you bang for your buck in the job seeking world like being good at coding interviews. So with all this in mind, let's continue in the next section and start to break down exactly how you can get better at coding questions.